lays it in. Indiana's deficit is 8.
The WNBA is crumbling before our very eyes, and it all comes down to one name, Caitlin Clark. The entire world of women's basketball has been flipped upside down in a way no one could have fully prepared for. And at the very center of this earthquake sits Caitlin Clark, the single most influential player the WNBA has ever seen. The player who took a league that was barely hanging on in the national conversation and, through sheer star power, forced millions of new fans to tune in, buy tickets, purchase merchandise, and care about a league that for nearly 3 decades had been bleeding money and struggling to gain even a fraction of mainstream attention. When Caitlin Clark arrived on the scene, she wasn't just another talented rookie coming out of college. She was a generational superstar, a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon whose presence created a cultural moment unlike anything the WNBA had ever experienced. For context, think about Tiger Woods in golf, LeBron James when he entered the NBA, or even Tom Brady's dominance in the NFL, players so transcendent that they pull casual viewers, even people who don't normally care about the sport, directly into the action. That is what Caitlin Clark did for the WNBA, and make no mistake about it, there is no WNBA without Caitlin Clark right now. At least not one that anyone beyond the most die-hard fans actually wants to watch. From the moment she stepped onto a professional court, ratings surged. Networks that had been treating the WNBA like filler content suddenly found themselves leading sports highlight shows with fever games. ESPN, Fox Sports, and every sports radio host you could name were talking about Caitlin Clark. She was a walking headline machine, someone whose mere presence created buzz at a level so high that even those who weren't fans of women's basketball found themselves curious. It wasn't just about her insane three-point shooting range or her court vision. It was about how she made every game an event. Fans would circle fever games on the calendar like they were Lakers-Celtics matchups in the NBA Finals. Families drove for hours just to see her play in person. She single-handedly sold out arenas that had been half empty for years. It was clear from day one that she wasn't just a rookie. She was the league's savior. But now, in what has to be one of the most catastrophic self-inflicted disasters in professional sports history, the WNBA finds itself reeling because Caitlin Clark is no longer playing this season. And the fallout has been swift and brutal. Her injury didn't just sideline a player, it effectively sidelined the entire league's relevance. The numbers don't lie. When Caitlin Clark plays, ratings spike through the roof. When she's out, the numbers fall off a cliff. Jason Whitlock, a longtime sports commentator known for his blunt takes, summed it up perfectly when he said flat out that he's done watching now that Caitlin Clark is gone. And he's not alone. Colin Cowherd, who hosts one of the most popular national sports radio shows in America, admitted that last season he led his show 6 separate times with Caitlin Clark stories, something almost unheard of for a WNBA player. But this year, after her injury, he hasn't led with the WNBA once. He didn't even bother to talk about the league. Why? Because, as he put it, Caitlin Clark isn't playing, and without her, there's nothing there worth discussing. That's not just an opinion. That's a harsh reality check for the WNBA's leadership. Let's break that down further because it's staggering. There are only a handful of sports brands in America powerful enough to move ratings on their own. We're talking about iconic teams like the Dallas Cowboys, the Los Angeles Lakers, the New York Yankees, and maybe a few transcendent individual athletes like Tiger Woods or Tom Brady at his peak. Caitlin Clark was operating at that exact level of draw for the WNBA when she played. People watched not because they loved the fever, not because they were invested in women's basketball, but because Caitlin Clark herself was a spectacle. She had the it factor, something that can't be manufactured or marketed into existence. And now with her gone for the remainder of the season, the league has lost the one thing that made it matter to the mainstream sports world. If you think I'm exaggerating, take a look at what's happening with fan engagement right now. A poll recently circulated on social media by a user named Gabby, who has around 4,500 followers, many of whom are hardcore Caitlin Clark supporters, asked a very simple, very revealing question. Are you sticking around to watch the Fever play without Caitlin Clark? The results were a wake-up call for anyone paying attention. With thousands of votes counted and only hours left in the poll, the numbers were devastating for the league. A staggering 47.5% of fans said flat out, no. They're done watching now that Caitlin Clark is gone. Let that sink in. Nearly half of the people who were tuning in for Fever games have already decided they're out. They're not going to schedule time to watch anymore. They're not going to stream games on their phones. They're not going to buy tickets or merchandise. They're finished. This isn't just some minor dip in viewership. This is a massive collapse, and it tells you everything you need to know about the WNBA's current state. Without Caitlin Clark, the league is right back to where it was before she arrived, irrelevant to the vast majority of sports fans. That poll wasn't just a random social media experiment. It was a clear reflection of what we're seeing in the real world. Attendance is plummeting, TV ratings are sinking. And the buzz that surrounded the league just a few months ago has completely evaporated. And honestly, can you blame the fans? Think about what's happened over the past few weeks. The Indiana Fever, led by coach Stephanie White and front office figures like Amber Cox, have been maddeningly vague and evasive about Caitlin Clark's injury status. For weeks, they kept dangling the possibility that she might come back, stringing fans along with carefully worded updates that never quite confirmed the reality that many of us suspected from the start, that she was out for the season. Every time Caitlin Clark's name was brought up in a press conference, you could see the discomfort on Stephanie White's face. It was obvious to anyone paying attention that the team knew far more than they were letting on. But instead of being upfront with their fans, they played games. They wanted to keep hope alive, not because it was realistic, but because they didn't want to admit the truth, that without Caitlin Clark, their season was dead on arrival. It was a calculated move designed to keep ticket sales and TV numbers from cratering for as long as possible. But here's the thing about deceit. Eventually, the truth comes out, and when it does, the backlash is twice as bad. Now, fans aren't just upset about Caitlin Clark being gone. They're furious about how it was handled. This kind of mistrust isn't easily repaired. Once a fan base feels betrayed, they don't just forgive and forget. And let's be real, this isn't just about one injury or one player. It's about the bigger picture. The WNBA finally had its moment in the sun. It's a chance to grow into a legitimate, thriving professional league with real mainstream appeal, and they blew it. They mishandled their most valuable asset, alienated a massive wave of new fans, and now they're paying the price. Jason Whitlock didn't mince words when he called this one of the biggest fumbles in sports history. And he's right. The WNBA had a once-in-a-generation opportunity handed to them on a silver platter. And instead of capitalizing, they let it slip through their fingers. The timing of the announcement was the final insult. Instead of being transparent and announcing Caitlin Clark's season-ending status weeks ago, they waited until 1 hour before the NFL season kicked off, clearly hoping the news would get buried under the avalanche of football coverage. It was a cowardly move that only made things worse. Fans aren't stupid. They can see when a league is trying to hide something, and this was as blatant as it gets. Now, instead of protecting their image, the WNBA has completely destroyed its credibility. And here's the harshest truth of all. This wasn't just a bad PR move or a rough season. This was an existential mistake. The WNBA's entire future hinged on Caitlin Clark's ability to keep fans engaged, to keep the spotlight on women's basketball, and to keep revenue flowing. Without her, there is no backup plan. There's no second superstar waiting in the wings to take her place. Players like Angel Reese, Aja Wilson, and others have tried to step into that role, but they simply don't have the same universal appeal. In fact, many of them are actively driving fans away with their attitudes and behavior. Whitlock called them unlikable, and while that might sound harsh, it's hard to argue with him when you see the way these players interact with the media and with fans. As it stands now, the WNBA is staring down a very bleak reality. The hype is gone. The momentum has been destroyed. The fans who were once tuning in religiously are now moving on to other things. College football, the NFL, the NBA, preseason, anything but WNBA games that no longer have Caitlin Clark to make them must-see TV. And unless something dramatic changes, this league may never recover from this moment. Caitlin Clark didn't just get hurt. She took the entire WNBA's relevance with her when she went down. That's not just a problem for the Fever or the league office. That's a death sentence. The bottom line is simple. No Caitlin Clark, no WNBA, at least not at the level we saw earlier this year. The league had its shot to prove it could thrive, and it failed. The trust is shattered. Indiana Fever fans feel betrayed as the NBA's. House of Cards collapses. The fallout from Caitlin Clark's season-ending injury announcement has not just shaken the WNBA. It has completely shattered the fragile trust between fans, the Indiana Fever organization, and the league itself. What we are witnessing right now is a full-scale revolt. A complete breakdown in the relationship between the paying audience and the very people running the sport. This isn't a small controversy or a routine injury update gone wrong. This is a catastrophic failure of leadership from top to bottom. And the anger brewing among Caitlin Clark's loyal supporters is unlike anything the WNBA has ever seen before. From team officials like Stephanie White and Amber Cox to league commissioner Kathy Engelbert. Every decision maker involved in this fiasco is now under intense scrutiny. The fans aren't just disappointed, they're furious. And that fury is spreading like wildfire across social media, sports radio, and every corner of the basketball community. For weeks, the Indiana Fever brass played a dangerous game with their fan base. They knew exactly how vital Caitlin Clark was to their ticket sales, merchandise, revenue, and TV ratings. They understood that without her, the team would be irrelevant to the broader sports world. So instead of being honest about her status, they engaged in a calculated campaign of deception, stringing fans along with vague statements, cryptic updates, and carefully crafted sound bites designed to keep hope alive. Every press conference became an exercise in frustration. Reporters would ask direct questions about Caitlin Clark's recovery, and Stephanie White would give evasive, non-committal answers that told us everything without actually saying anything. Her facial expressions, her tone of voice. Even her body language screamed that she knew the truth but wasn't allowed to share it. The frustration reached a boiling point because fans could see through the lies. They weren't naive. They knew that something didn't add up, and yet they kept buying tickets. They kept tuning into games. They kept holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, Caitlin Clark would return and save the season. It was like watching someone cling to a relationship that was already over, painful, exhausting, and ultimately futile. Then, when the truth finally came out, it wasn't delivered with transparency or respect. No, the league chose to drop the bombshell 1 hour before the NFL season kicked off. As if they could quietly bury the news beneath a tidal wave of football coverage. That was the final insult. It was a move so brazenly manipulative, so insulting to the intelligence of their fan base, that it sparked a backlash the WNBA was completely unprepared for. Let's call this what it is, a betrayal. Fans invested their time, money, and emotions into this team and this league because Caitlin Clark inspired them to care. She wasn't just a player. She was a movement, a beacon of hope for a sport that had spent nearly 3 decades on the fringes of mainstream relevance. The Fever and the WNBA leadership took that goodwill and burned it to the ground in pursuit of short-term profits. They didn't just mismanage a player's injury. They weaponized it using Caitlin Clark's absence as a tool to manipulate consumer behavior. That's not just bad business, that's outright exploitation. And the fans know it. The numbers paint a stark picture of just how deep this betrayal runs. That now infamous poll by Gabby on Twitter wasn't just a random blip. It was a canary in the coal mine, a warning of the exodus to come. With thousands of votes tallied, 47.5% of fans openly declared they were done watching the Fever without Caitlin Clark. Think about that. Nearly half of the audience gone overnight. And those are just the people willing to admit it publicly. The true number is likely even higher, as casual viewers simply stop tuning in without bothering to announce their departure. This isn't a dip in ratings. This is a mass extinction event for fan engagement. Jason Whitlock didn't hold back when he addressed the situation. And his words have been echoing across the sports world ever since. He called this one of the greatest fumbles in sports history, comparing it to a team having a clear path to victory only to drop the ball at the goal line. In his view, the WNBA had a once-in-a-generation chance to transform itself from a struggling niche league into a legitimate force in professional sports. And they blew it spectacularly. Caitlin Clark's arrival was supposed to be the turning point, the moment that everything changed. Instead, it has become a cautionary tale about how arrogance, incompetence, and greed can destroy even the most promising opportunity. Whitlock also didn't mince words when it came to the other players in the league. In his assessment, much of the WNBA's current roster is simply unlikable. He specifically called out Angel Reese, Aja Wilson, Paige Buchers, and Alyssa Thomas, labeling them as players who not only fail to draw new fans, but actively repel them with their attitudes and behavior. This isn't about talent. These women are undeniably skilled athletes. It's about marketability and charisma, the intangible qualities that make sports stars larger than life. Caitlin Clark has those qualities in spades. She connects with fans. She inspires them. She gives them someone to root for. By contrast, many of her peers come across as hostile, petty, and ungrateful, which makes it incredibly difficult for casual viewers to form an emotional attachment to the league as a whole. This dynamic has created a toxic environment where Caitlin Clark's absence doesn't just leave a void, it highlights all the problems that were already there. Without her to act as a unifying figure, the cracks in the foundation are suddenly visible to everyone. Fans are noticing the lack of star power, the uninspired play, the sloppy coaching, and the league's chronic inability to generate excitement. They're also noticing the attitude problem. Social media has been flooded with clips of players making dismissive comments about fans, criticizing Caitlin Clark, or engaging in petty feuds that do nothing to grow the sport. It's a bad look, and it's driving people away in droves. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever's internal dysfunction has been laid bare for all to see. Stephanie White's coaching style has come under heavy fire from both fans and analysts. Her offense is stagnant, predictable, and painfully boring to watch. Even when Caitlin Clark was healthy, games often felt like a slog, with minimal ball movement and little creativity. Now, without Clark to inject some excitement, the product on the court is borderline unwatchable. Fans who were willing to endure White's system because they wanted to see Caitlin Clark's brilliance are now realizing they have no reason to stick around. Amber Cox, the team's general manager, hasn't escaped criticism either. Her handling of roster construction has been questioned repeatedly, with many pointing out that the Fever have failed to surround Caitlin Clark with the kind of talent needed to compete at a high level, instead of building a team designed to maximize her strengths. They've assembled a mismatched collection of players who don't complement each other and, in some cases, don't even seem to like each other. The locker room chemistry is toxic, and it shows on the court. This dysfunction extends all the way to the top of the WNBA hierarchy. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has been accused of prioritizing optics over substance, focusing on flashy marketing campaigns while ignoring the league's systemic issues. Her decision to delay the Caitlin Clark announcement until the NFL kickoff wasn't just a PR blunder, it was a betrayal of the fans' trust. It sent a clear message that the league values spin control more than transparency. And that kind of message is impossible to walk back once it's out in the open. The anger isn't confined to Indiana either. Fans across the country are voicing their frustration. Social media is filled with posts from people who feel duped, who spent their hard-earned money on tickets, jerseys, and streaming packages under the false belief that they'd be able to watch Caitlin Clark play this season. These aren't just casual viewers. These are the very people the league needs most: passionate, engaged fans who are willing to invest in the product. Losing them is devastating, and winning them back will be next to impossible. Colin Cowherd added fuel to the fire when he revealed that he hasn't talked about the WNBA at all this year since Caitlin Clark went down. Last season, he said, he led his show with Clark stories multiple times, which is almost unheard of for women's sports. This year, nothing. Not because he dislikes the league, but because there's nothing worth discussing without her. There's nothing worth discussing without her. TTHE final blow without Caitlin Clark. The WNBA's future hangs by a thread. The WNBA now stands at the edge of a cliff, teetering dangerously close to a fall that could end its relevance once and for all. The league's entire future, everything it worked for over nearly 3 decades, now hangs by the thinnest of threads, and that thread was Caitlin Clark. Her injury didn't just sideline a star player. It ripped out the very heart of the league, exposing a reality that too many people at the top refuse to acknowledge. For years, the WNBA has operated under the illusion that it could grow organically through parity, team balance, and shared star power. But Caitlin Clark shattered that myth the moment she stepped on the court. She didn't just bring attention to the WNBA, she was the attention. Her games weren't just events. They were cultural moments. The difference between a fever game with Caitlin Clark and a fever game without her is the difference between a sold-out arena buzzing with energy and a half-empty gym echoing with apathy. That's not a small problem. That's an existential crisis. The most alarming thing about this situation isn't just that the WNBA lost Caitlin Clark for the season. It's that there is no backup plan. There's no second superstar waiting in the wings to keep the momentum alive. Angel Reese, Aja Wilson, Paige Buchers, they've all been hyped up in marketing campaigns. But none of them have come close to generating the kind of passion Caitlin Clark does. In fact, many of these players have actively alienated fans with their behavior, from petty on-court antics to hostile interactions with the media. They've created an atmosphere that feels toxic and unwelcoming to new viewers. Jason Whitlock was brutally honest when he said that most of the league is simply unlikable. It's harsh, but it's true. Fans don't just tune in for talent. They tune in for personalities they can connect with, people they want to root for. Caitlin Clark had that rare quality that transcended the game. She wasn't just a great player, she was beloved. And now she's gone, leaving behind a roster of stars who can't fill the void and, in some cases, make the product harder to watch. This dynamic has created a perfect storm of disaster, with Caitlin Clark sidelined. The league is being forced to rely on players who don't have her universal appeal, and the results are devastating. Ratings have plummeted. Attendance has cratered. Even die-hard fans are admitting publicly that they no longer have a reason to watch. The poll numbers we've seen are staggering. Nearly half of the Fever's fan base has checked out entirely now that Caitlin Clark is unavailable. And it's not just Indiana. This effect ripples across the entire league. Caitlin Clark wasn't just boosting the Fever. She was lifting every team they played against. Whenever she came to town, ticket sales spiked. Local media coverage increased, and the energy around the game reached a fever pitch. Without her, those numbers collapse and everyone suffers. The business implications are catastrophic. Sponsorship deals that were signed in the euphoria of Caitlin Clark's rookie season are now in jeopardy. Brands don't want to be associated with a product that's losing relevance by the day. Broadcasters are frustrated because the ratings they were promised aren't materializing. Even merchandise sales, which had been booming thanks to Caitlin Clark's popularity, are starting to nosedive. The financial ripple effect of this one injury is almost unimaginable. It's not an exaggeration to say that millions of dollars are vanishing overnight. And with them, the league's credibility in the